It was at that moment that the man in black began to climb. Not quickly, of course, and not without great effort, but still there was no doubt that he was, in spite of the sheerness of the cliffs, heading in an upward direction. "Inconceivable!" the Sicilian cried. The Spaniard whirled on him. "Stop saying that word! It was inconceivable that anyone could follow us, but when we looked behind, there was the man in black. It was inconceivable that anyone could sail as fast as we could sail, and yet he gained on us. Now this too is inconceivable, but look!" And the Spaniard pointed down through the night. "You see how he rises?" The man in black was, indeed, rising. Somehow, and in an almost miraculous way, his fingers were finding holds in the crevices, and he was now perhaps 15 feet closer to the top, farther from death. The Sicilian advanced on the Spaniard now, his wild eyes glittering at the insubordination. "I have the keenest mind that has ever turned to unlawful pursuits," he began. "So when I tell you something, it is not guesswork, it is fact. And the fact is, the man in black is not following us. A more logical explanation would be that he is simply an ordinary sailor who dabbles in mountain climbing as a hobby, who happens to have the same general final destination as we do. That certainly satisfies me, and I hope it satisfies you. In any case, we cannot take the risk of his seeing us with the princess, and therefore one of you must kill him." "Shall I do it?" the Turk wondered. The Sicilian shook his head. "No, Fezzik," he said finally. "I need your strength to carry the girl. Pick her up now and let us hurry along." He turned to the Spaniard. "We'll be heading directly for the frontier of Gilder. Catch up quickly as you can once he's dead." The Spaniard nodded. The Sicilian hobbled away. The Turk hoisted the princess, began following the humpback. Just before he lost sight of the Spaniard, he turned and hollered, "Catch up quickly!" "Don't I always?" the Spaniard waved. "Farewell, Fezzik." "Farewell, Inigo," the Turk replied, and then he was gone, and the Spaniard was alone. Inigo moved to the cliff's edge and knelt with his customary quick grace. 250 feet below him now, the man in black continued his painful climb. Inigo lay flat, staring down, trying to pierce the moonlight and find the climber's secret. For a long while, Inigo did not move. He was a good learner, but not a particularly fast one, so he had to study. Finally, he realized that somehow, by some mystery, the man in black was making fists and jamming them into rocks and using them for support. Then he would reach up with the other hand until he found a high split in the rock and make another fist and jam it in. Whenever he could find support for his feet, he would use it, but mostly it was the jammed fists that made the climbing possible. Inigo marveled. What a truly extraordinary adventurer this man in black must be. He was close enough now for Inigo to realize that the man was masked, a black hood covering all but his features. Another outlaw? Perhaps. Then why should they have to fight, and for what? Inigo shook his head. It was a shame that such a fellow must die, but he had his orders, so there it was. Sometimes he did not like the Sicilian's commands, but what could he do? Without the brains of the Sicilian, he, Inigo, would never be able to command jobs of this caliber. The Sicilian was a master planner. Inigo was a creature of the moment. The Sicilian said, "Kill him," so why waste sympathy on the man in black? Someday, someone would kill Inigo, and the world would not stop to mourn. He stood now, quickly jumping to his feet, his blade-thin body ready for action. Only the man in black was still many feet away. There was nothing to do but wait for him. Inigo hated waiting. So, to make the time more pleasant, he pulled from the scabbard his only love, the six-fingered sword. How it danced in the moonlight, how glorious and true. Inigo brought it to his lips, and with all the fervor in his great Spanish heart, kissed the metal. Inigo. In the mountains of central Spain, set high in the hills above Toledo, was the village of Arabella. It was very small, and the air was always clear. That was all you could say that was good about Arabella. Terrific air. You could see for miles. But there was no work, the dogs overran the streets, and there was never enough food. The air, clear enough, was also too hot in daylight, freezing at night. As to Inigo's personal life, he was always just a trifle hungry. He had no brothers or sisters, and his mother had died in childbirth. He was fantastically happy. Because of his father. Domingo Montoya was funny-looking and crotchety and impatient and absent-minded and never smiled. Inigo loved him. Totally. Don't ask why. There really wasn't any one reason you could put your finger on. Oh, probably Domingo loved him back, but love is many things, none of them logical. Domingo Montoya made swords. If you wanted a fabulous sword, did you go to Domingo Montoya? If you wanted a great, balanced piece of work, did you go to the mountains behind Toledo? If you wanted a masterpiece, a sword for the ages, was it Arabella that your footsteps led you to? Nope. You went to Madrid, because Madrid was where lived the famous Yesti, and if you had the money and he had the time, you got your weapon. Yesti was fat and jovial and one of the richest and most honored men in the city, and he should have been. He made wonderful swords, and noblemen bragged to each other when they owned an original Yesti. But sometimes, not often mind you, maybe once a year, maybe less, a request would come in for a weapon that was more than even Yesti could make. When that happened, did Yesti say, "Alas, I am sorry, I cannot do it"? Nope. What he said was, "Of course, I'd be delighted. 50% down payment, please. The rest before delivery. Come back in a year, thank you very much." The next day, he would set out for the hills behind Toledo. "So, Domingo!" Yesti would call out when he reached Inigo's father's hut. "So, Yesti!" Domingo Montoya would return from the hut doorway. Then the two men would embrace, and Inigo would come running, and up Yesti would rumple his hair, and then Inigo would make tea while the two men talked. "I need you," Yesti would always begin. Domingo would grunt. "This very week I have accepted a commission to make a sword for a member of the Italian nobility. It is to be jewel encrusted at the handle, and the jewels are to spell out the name of his present mistress, and no." That single word and no other. But it was enough. When Domingo Montoya said no, it meant nothing else. Inigo, busy with the tea, knew what would happen now. Yesti would use his charm. No. Yesti would use his wealth. No. His wit, his wonderful gift of persuasion. No. He would beg, entreat, promise, pledge. No. Insults, threats. No. Finally, genuine tears. No. More tea, Yesti? Perhaps another cup. And then a big, "But why won't you?" Inigo hurried to refill their cups so as to never miss a word. He knew they had been brought up together, had known each other 60 years, had never not loved one another deeply, and it thrilled him when he could hear them arguing. That was the strange thing. Arguing was all they ever did. "Why? My fat friend asks me why. He sits there on his world-class ass and has the nerve to ask me why. Yesti, come to me sometimes with a challenge. Once, just once, right up and say, 'Domingo, I need a sword for an 80-year-old man to fight a duel,' and I would embrace you and cry, 'Yes,' because to make a sword for an 80-year-old man to survive a duel, that would be something. Because that sword would have to be strong enough to win, yet light enough to not tire his weary arm. I would have to use all my will to perhaps find an unknown metal strong but very light, or devise a different formula for a known one. Mix some bronze with some iron and some air in a way ignored for 1,000 years. I would kiss your smelly feet for an opportunity like that, fat Yesti. But to make a stupid sword with stupid jewels in the form of a stupid initial so some stupid Italian can thrill his stupid mistress, no. That I will not do. For the last time I ask you, please. For the last time I tell you I am sorry, no. I gave my word that the sword would be made, Yesti said. I cannot make it. In all the world, there is no one to come to but you, and you say no, which means I have gone back on my commitment, which means I have lost my honor, which means that since honor is the only thing in the world I care about, and since I cannot live without it, I must die. And since you are my dearest friend, I may as well die now with you, basking in the warmth of your affection. And here, Yesti would pull out a knife. It was a magnificent thing, a gift from Domingo on Yesti's wedding day. Goodbye, little Inigo, Yesti would say then. God grant you your quota of smiles. It was forbidden for Inigo to interrupt. Goodbye, little Domingo, Yesti would say then. Although I die in your hut, and although it is your own stubborn fault that causes my ceasing, in other words, even though you are killing me, don't think twice about it. I love you as I always have, and God forbid your conscience will give you any trouble. He pulled open his coat, brought the knife closer to his chest, closer. Oh, the pain is worse than I imagined, Yesterday said. How can it hurt when the point of the weapon is still an inch away from your chest? Domingo asked. I'm anticipating. Don't bother me. Let me die unpestered. He brought the point to his skin, pushed. Domingo grabbed the knife away. Someday I won't stop you, he said. Inigo, set an extra place for supper. I was all set to kill myself, truly. Enough dramatics. What is on the menu for this evening? The usual gruel. Inigo, go and check and see if there is anything by chance in my carriage outside. There was always a feast waiting in the carriage. And after the food and the stories would come the departure, and always before the departure would come the request. We could be partners, Yesterday would say. In Madrid, my name before yours on the sign, of course, but equal partners in all things. No. All right, your name before mine. You are the greatest sword maker. You deserve to come first. Have a good trip back. Why won't you? Because, my friend Yesti, you are very famous and very rich, and so you should be, because you make wonderful weapons, but you must also make them for any fool who happens along. I am poor, and no one knows me in all the world except you and Inigo, but I do not have to suffer fools. You are an artist, Yesti said. No, not yet. A craftsman only. But I dream to be an artist. I pray that someday, if I work with enough care, if I am very lucky, I will make a weapon that is a work of art. Call me an artist then, and I will answer. Este entered his carriage. Domingo appeared at the window and whispered, I remind you only of this. When you get this jewel-encrusted sword, claim it as your own. Tell no one of my involvement. Your secret is safe with me. Embraces and waves, the carriage would leave, and that was the way of life before the six-fingered sword.